Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our viewers from around the globe today. Thank you for joining us for our webinar titled Better Backup with Software You Have Now, where we'll be covering the importance of a comprehensive DR strategy leveraging on-prem and cloud backups to provide a cost-effective solution that protects your mission-critical data. Joining us today is Earl Follett, Senior Analyst at SSG-Now, who is a long-term IT professional and expert in networking, operating systems, cloud computing, DR, and business continuity. Welcome, Earl.
Thanks, Laura.
Also joining us today is John Tour, Head of Product Management and CMO at Cloudian. Welcome, John.
Hello, Laura.
Before we begin, I wanted to point out to the audience that we will be taking questions at the end of the webinar, so please enter any of those questions in the question box at the side of your screen. With that, I will hand it over to Earl.
Well, greetings, everyone, from beautiful Austin, Texas, and also from San Mateo, California. My name is Earl Follett, and I've been involved in various aspects of backup and restore and disaster recovery, business continuity for about 25 years in various roles in IT. So what we're going to talk about today are some of the challenges and the problems of backup recovery and disaster recovery. We're going to talk about some of the best practices that work for organizations of any size to protect your company's digital assets. And then we're going to have a short presentation at the end for some of the solutions to the problems we'll talk about today, and that will be presented by John from Cloudian. So let's get started. First, let's talk about some of the problems of data loss. As the slide says here, most companies will face one or more data loss events, and some of those could definitely be a critical data loss event, which means that there would be some percentage, maybe up to 25% or more of companies that have a severe data loss disaster or data loss event that will never be able to reopen. And some of those statistics actually come out of the 9/11 attacks in New York. About 25% of the companies in the Manhattan area never reopened and never recovered from that data disaster. So although data disasters are rare, you really have to be prepared and have to have a plan in place. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about here in the first section. So let's talk a little bit about the risk. If your company is at risk of failing after a data loss event, that tells you how important DR plans are and business continuity plans are. We're not going to talk about business continuity today, but let me just tell you a little bit of what that is. So business continuity is above and beyond being able to recover your digital assets. It's also being able to have things like your phone systems up and running and being able to run your payroll and handle customer service requests. So DR, what we'll talk about today, is data loss and how you can easily recover from that. And there are several different types of data loss that can occur and that is common. The first is probably one of the most common. That's accidental data loss. We've all accidentally deleted a file. We've had coworkers who have deleted files. We also have data loss that could be due to malicious activities such as viruses or malware. And we could also have data loss due to, let's say, a disgruntled employee. And a good example of that, although they've never actually proven the source of the Sony hacks a couple of years ago, at one point they were thinking that could be an inside job, and it was never actually pinned down. But the point is, these types of events do occur, and they can affect your ability to do business no matter what size your organization. In the past, the expense and complexity of disaster recovery was really one of the things that held a lot of companies back. So I've been working with backup and recovery, as I said, for many, many years, and that started out being having a tape drive in the server. You would run a backup every Friday, and then we realized, well, if the building has a disaster of some kind, then our backups are at risk. So then we started sticking the backup tapes into our briefcase and taking it home for the weekend, and that was our new DR plan, because now we had data off-site at least some or most of the time. But with the popularity and the explosion of cloud-based storage, there are some really fantastic and very cost-effective options that are available now that obviously almost no one uses tape anymore. And the ease and the simplicity and the cost-effectiveness, the low cost of cloud-based storage is really key to every company having an ongoing plan. So first, let's talk about what exactly is a disaster. It could be a natural or man-made event that either prevents data access or causes the loss of data. So natural disasters obviously could be floods, tornadoes, lightning strikes, hurricanes, etc., that actually damage physical facilities. And then also we can have other types of disasters through hacking, accidental data loss, power loss. There have been some high-profile data center power loss incidents over the last few years with some managed hosting providers that has really underscored the importance of protecting the power. And then, as we discussed on the last slide, intentional employee data destruction. So there are a lot of different ways you can lose your data, and the point is it kind of doesn't matter what the source of the data loss is. You've got to have a plan in place and a process to be able to quickly and easily recover after a data loss event. So we talked about viruses, malware, and then accidental loss due to employees, data corruption, hardware failures, all these other ways that the data can be either destroyed or affected in a negative way. So now we've talked about what the disaster part of it means. Let's talk about the recovery part. So what is disaster recovery? It's predicated on the assumption that you're going to need a timely method of recovering missing data regardless of the cause, natural, man-made, accidental, or otherwise. And I can't stress this enough as far as the best practice. Every company should have a DR plan in place, whether you're a single person doing all of IT in a small business, whether you're in a medium-sized IT shop or enterprise IT shop. You need to have a plan written down and distributed so you will know how you will attack a problem of data loss, how you will work to recover any lost data. And a couple of typical terms that you'll come across as you're developing a DR plan, if you don't already have one, are RTO and RPO. So RTO means recovery time objective, and that is you're setting a goal for how far in the future you want to have all of your data, your missing data, restored by. So maybe, depending on the complexity of your environment, you might have a 30-minute RTO, or it might be a 5-day RTO, depending on the complexity and how long it takes to recover missing data. And we'll talk a little bit about the performance trade-offs, how you get the RTO within an acceptable limit and at what cost. And then RPO is the point in time to which you're going to go back to recover your data. So let's say you had a corrupted hard drive and you lost a bunch of data at 5 o'clock yesterday. So your RPO would be able to go back into that time to, let's say, 4 o'clock and 59 minutes, and that would be the point at which you would want to restore from in order to put your data back into production. And typically speaking, the shorter the RTO, the more it costs. The quicker you need to restore your data, usually the more that costs. And then let's talk a little bit about the various ways to approach disaster recovery in the cloud storage environment. And what you'll find throughout this presentation is that hybrid cloud-based DR is the best of both worlds as far as the inexpensive protection offered by cloud storage and the quick data recovery offered by an on-premises solution. So in order to design an effective disaster recovery plan, first you have to know what you're protecting, and that should be anything that you can't do business without. So it could be customer lists, it could be your accounting data files. It's almost certainly going to be, if you have Outlook, it's going to be your PST files, anything that's critical for the ongoing operation of your business. The next thing you should do as part of your plan is to investigate and set an appropriate RTO and RPO for your requirements and for the amount of budget you have to spend on this. And one of the things that I learned the hard way many years ago is that a backup is only as good as the restoration process. So be sure that whatever backup plan you choose, be sure that you, on a regular basis, test the ability to restore that data. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about compatibility. When you choose a disaster recovery solution, you need to make sure that that solution, whether it's on-prem or cloud-based or hybrid, you need to make sure that it's compatible with your existing applications and your data stores. For instance, if you, let's say your company already uses S3, you would make sure that you chose a DR solution that would be compatible and that would be integrated tightly into Amazon S3. If you had an ability or a need to do long-term archiving, for instance, in Amazon Glacier, then you would want to make sure that your whatever solution you pick was compatible with that goal also. And then obviously, based on the type of storage you need, whether you need file-based storage or object-based storage, that's an important consideration when you choose your solution. In some cases, if you have highly critical mission-critical data that you may want to distribute to more than one remote location, then the ability to distribute data to multiple sites should be on your requirements list for your DR solution evaluation. And then for some companies, being able to, this will be mostly with larger companies, being able to create software as a service infrastructure, that would make it easier to integrate your existing applications into whatever DR solution you choose. Most people, when they think of disaster recovery, don't really think of data governance and compliance. But there are actually, for many companies, regulatory reasons that they must have a DR plan in place in order to comply with their compliance directives, governmental requirements, and things like that. Also, the ability to quickly restore that data in the case of a data loss event may be a governance issue. So it's not just protecting the data to help your compliance, but also the ability to restore that data may be part of your compliance or your data governance framework. And also for a lot of companies that deal in personally identifiable information, or PII, or things like HIPAA data for medical records, you need to make sure that if you have a requirement to protect that type of data with a certain level of encryption, whether it's a company guideline or whether it's a governmental guideline, you need to make sure that whatever solution you choose for DR can support that encryption level. And as I've already mentioned, regularly testing your DR may also be a compliance issue, a compliance requirement to make sure that you can fully recover in the case of a data loss event that falls under your data governance or compliance. So let's talk a little bit about, I've touched on it briefly, the different ways you can protect your data now leveraging cloud-based storage. You could have an on-premise solution, which typically might be required for high-performance environments where you have a lot of mission-critical data that in the event of a data loss event you would need to restore very quickly. Whether or not you have PII in your environment, and if you do have PII, whether it is legal and acceptable for you to store that data in the cloud or not. So in some cases, on-prem DR may be required based on some of these criteria. And by on-prem DR, what I'm talking about is either an appliance or a VM-based virtual appliance that would handle the on-premises DR process. So it would handle the backup, and it would also be able to handle a recovery in the case of a data loss event. But of course, as I mentioned with my suitcase example, my briefcase example, storing data offsite is always going to be a good idea. It's always going to give you more protection. And with the lowering of costs in the cloud environment, it certainly is cost-effective, much more cost-effective to be able to push data to the cloud, understanding that cloud-based DR is going to be a little bit slower to restore because you're going to have to download that data from the cloud as needed. So kind of the intersection of these two circumstances is the hybrid DR solution, where you have both a local appliance, but it also serves as a gateway to your cloud-based storage. So you're getting your mission-critical data can be staged locally while you still have that protection of off-site storage in the cloud. You also gain the ability to very quickly recover from a data loss event by having that hybrid, that on-prem, either appliance or virtual appliance. And we'll also talk a little bit about the tiering of data storage. If you have an on-premise solution, then you want to specify and make sure you have a requirement identified to auto-tier data identified by the on-prem appliance. So what that strives to do is to match the cost of storage, the data access frequency, to the most cost-effective tier. So if you have some files that are rarely, if ever, accessed, then those might be, certainly would be a candidate for cloud storage, but might even be able to be put into a system like Glacier for long-term archiving, depending on that frequency. And then maybe for stuff that gets hit every day, you'll want to keep a copy of that locally on the appliance. And you also have to consider the performance of your applications and those requirements, because that can affect where you would want to tier your data. Once again, data that's commonly accessed, if it's a high-performance application, you're probably going to want to keep that data as close to the application infrastructure as possible. And then, as I mentioned, being able to auto-archive to that ultra-low-cost cloud certainly will be able to save you a lot of money in the long run. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about some other things you should look for when developing a DR plan or putting together a requirements list to look for a DR solution. Performance. Usually you'll get better performance from an on-prem solution on an appliance or a VM-based solution. That will usually give you the best performance because it's usually local to your data center, or it's in close proximity to your applications and to the databases themselves. It's very important that you not just think about today when you're looking at a DR solution, but you look at the ability of that solution to scale, and I mean that in both directions. You would want to be able to scale up seamlessly as your data storage needs increase, or if for whatever reason those data storage requirements were to be reduced over time, you would want your solution to be able to scale down so that you're only paying for what you need. That's obviously going to save you a lot of money. Also, depending on the environment and your architecture, the ability to compress data may be able to save you time and money. If you're going to have to ship certain large files and large data stores up to the cloud, compression may be something that you would want to look at to save time and allow those things to go quicker. And then obviously we talked a little bit about PII and data governance. So if it's a requirement for your company and your company's data, you would also want to make sure that whatever DR solution you choose, whether it's on-prem, cloud-based, or a hybrid, make sure that it supports the encryption of data both at rest and in motion, if that is a requirement for your company. So a few of the best practices I'll mention to develop a cost-effective DR plan. The first thing is have a plan. It's better to have a plan that's not fully thought out than to have no plan at all. So I would encourage you to develop a plan, identify the mission-critical data, identify your budget, and then identify your requirements. And that gives you the ability to evaluate your solutions in an unbiased way to make sure that whatever solution you choose meets your requirements in all of those aspects: budget, the ability to quickly restore, auto-tiering, encryption, compression, etc. So match your DR solution to your requirements and budget. Make sure that you have the ability to scale quickly and easily, scaling up and scaling down as needed. And then another important thing, this gets more over to the accounting side of things, OpEx, CapEx, and how you're going to pay for your DR plan. In a lot of cases, it's really an advantage if you choose a DR solution that gives you some cost predictability into the future, so that you know not only what your costs will be today, but if you can find a solution that offers predictability and cost down the road, it obviously allows you to save time and money, so you don't have to constantly be searching for a new solution because the old solution suddenly got expensive as the amount of data you protected scaled up. So keep all these things in mind. And now we're going to take a little shift here, and I'm going to introduce from Cloudian, John Tour, Cloudian's Chief Marketing Officer, who's going to talk a little bit more about Cloudian's DR solutions. Take it away, John.
Thank you very much, Earl, and great to be with you guys today. So I'm going to just give you a quick little overview on Cloudian storage and what we do in the backup arena, because I think backup is definitely a significant use case for object storage. So what Cloudian is we are on-premise S3 compatible object storage, and what that means is we are a device. We can be purchased as either an appliance or as software-defined storage, and we sit in your data center along with your other storage equipment, which could include hyper-converged infrastructures, all-flash storage. We're definitely complementary to those types of solutions, because what we are is a very scalable storage pool. We are S3 compatible, so Earl talked about the benefits of using cloud as a backup storage target. We would provide an on-premise equivalent to cloud. You can think of it as being like cloud storage in your data center because it uses the same S3 interface and it provides the same kinds of attributes in terms of scalability, in terms of ease of use, and also in terms of cost. We just recently introduced a solution which gets the cost down to in the range of ½ cent per gigabyte per month. So we're definitely in the cloud realm when it comes to the cost structure as well. And we're certainly in the cloud realm when it comes to scalability. One of the key attributes of object storage is that you can start with a small solution. Think of these appliances as being like bricks. You can start with a small building with just a few bricks and then grow them by adding on nodes over time and thereby create a storage environment with a single namespace and hundreds of petabytes of capacity. So you can imagine with that cost structure and with that scalability that this would make a great target for data protection. And in fact, that is the #1 use case today for object storage is data protection. And the reason is that not only is it a great environment for data protection in terms of the cost, scalability, etc., it's also very widely supported. So if you look at all the backup vendors out there, from Veritas to Commvault to Rubrik to ArcServe, these guys all support S3 protocol as one of their backup targets. So it's very easy to implement as well. And there are really two ways you can use object storage as a backup target. And the first one I'll talk about is as a primary backup target. So Earl already went through the alternatives, with traditional storage. You can either use disk, which is expensive, or tape, which has its own issues. I don't think you're going to fit the tapes into your briefcase anymore, Earl, but that must have been nice when you could. But now you're talking about a moving van. Either way, you've got challenges in terms of how you maintain that storage environment over time. And the beauty of Cloudian or object storage in general is it just makes it so much simpler, because not only is it cost effective, you get the same kind of cost parameters you get with tape, or nearly the same kind of cost. You've now got a single namespace of disk-based storage. So you've got a large pool that you can write to quickly and read from quickly to meet your RTO, RPO objectives. So that on-prem piece is very easy to use, very scalable, and very fast. Great attributes for the data protection environment. In addition, you have the ability with this type of storage to tier off to cloud. Because as Earl already mentioned, cloud makes a great secondary target for disaster recovery. When you take data out to the cloud, you're by definition moving it off-site. You've got a disaster recovery plan in place. And we allow you to tier data off automatically. So you've got a single namespace environment that's got recently stored snapshots or backup data on-prem, and then older copies can be automatically tiered off to the cloud and managed with a single namespace. So when your software goes to retrieve that information from the cloud, it's all handled via the Cloudian. It knows where the data is, brings it back in, makes it available to the software. So with on-prem backup plus the option of Cloud Archive, you've really got the best of both worlds. And the cost of this is just amazing. When you compare it with alternatives such as a purpose-built backup appliance like Data Domain, the cost savings you can achieve are just amazing. 80% cost savings by virtue of moving from a high-cost appliance to purpose-built object storage, which is designed to be efficient and cost-effective. The reason it's so cost-effective, we run on industry-standard hardware. Whether you buy the appliance from us or you use software-defined storage, it's running on industry standard hardware. So that in itself is very cost effective. And then we've got the fact that it's a very, very efficient storage platform. It's just designed to be something which stores data in a very low overhead kind of way. In fact, backup vendors are very enthusiastic about this as a backup target because it changes the game for how they can work with on-prem storage. Because it's so scalable, because it has the option of being hybrid off to cloud, it changes the game. And in fact, Commvault awarded an innovation award to a Cloudian customer who was doing exactly this. This innovation in data protection was awarded to a company in the Netherlands called Schuberg Philis, and they back up 3,800 clients every day to the Cloudian storage with 3,500 backup jobs. So it's a pretty amazing scale of infrastructure, and also a great testament that Commvault saw this and thought that, hey, this is something that people really need to take a look at. So what I would encourage for your next steps is visit Cloudian.com and have a look at the backup and archive pages there. We've got some solutions for backup and archive shown. There's also a backup solutions note, both generic for just kind of general backup solutions and also notes for specific backup software. So if you have Veritas or you have Commvault or you have Rubrik, there are notes specifically for that. And we've also got a few configuration guides there where you can see how easy it is. In addition, if you'd like to take it to the next step, please give us a call. We can set up a free storage assessment where we can come in, spend a day in your shop, and look at your backup environment, understand how much data is being stored where, and we can provide you with an ROI analysis to see how Cloudian object storage might work in your environment. So with that, I'll turn it back to Laura. I think there's some questions that have come in, and we'd be happy to answer those.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you, Earl. So we do have a few questions in here today. Looks like a number for Cloudian. So the first one is, John, am I locked into one cloud storage vendor?
Yeah, so that's one of the beauties of the object storage environment today is that you're not locked in. The absence of lock-in is made possible by a standard, and that's what really has changed in the object storage world. Is there now is a standard. Amazon created the S3 standard 10 years ago, and it's really taken off in the object storage world and become the dominant way that people talk to object storage. So it's not only used by Amazon, it's used by numerous other vendors as well. So we in particular support obviously Amazon plus the Google Cloud Platform plus a dozen other vendors that are operating S3 compatible storage.
Okay, great. Another question in is what is the largest customer deployment that you have?
So we've actually got backup jobs running on 10 petabyte environments now. There is a 10 petabyte deployment out there today. In addition, one of the two beauties of object storage is one, it scales on capacity. The second is it scales on number of files or objects being stored as well. So we've actually got one customer that's deployed with 2 million customers accessing the device in a photo sharing environment. And that's not backup, but it speaks to the scalability of the environment overall.
Okay, great.
And I see we got a question here, how do we scale performance for ingest on backup jobs? So performance is another area where object storage really aligns well with the requirements of data protection, because object storage scales very well on sequential throughput. So in a 16-node environment, which is 8 of the boxes we just announced yesterday, we'll deliver 5 megabytes per second of backup performance. So 5 megabytes per second, 5 gigabytes per second is a pretty good rate. As the environment grows, the data is striped across all available nodes, and as it's striped across available nodes, that ingest performance actually increases. parallelism is built into the design of object storage, which makes it really well suited. Also, one attribute of the S3 interface, which is really helpful, is the multi-part upload feature. Because the S3 interface was designed to work over the internet, it has built in a capability of breaking up large transfers into small chunks. And that's designed right into the interface so that when you're going over long hops, you can be assured of a good transfer rate. In case one gets interrupted, you don't have to go back to the beginning. You only go back to the beginning of that small chunk. The benefit of this in the data protection world is that same benefit also applies in local storage, because now you can break up transfers into numerous small chunks that then move in parallel across the environment. So you're not limited by the rate of a single device. Everything can go across multiple devices simultaneously.
Okay, great. Is each node an S3 endpoint?
Yes, it is. Each node is a standalone S3 endpoint, and you can absolutely do load balancing on them. However, it's not necessary to run load balancing to get the benefits of the parallelism, because when you're using multi-part upload, they're going to have different destinations on different nodes. So parallelism is going to get built into the environment regardless. But it is also possible to use load balancing as a further way to optimize flows.
Great. One for Earl. What do you find is the biggest requirement for backup solutions? Is it cost or performance?
Well, I think for most companies it's cost. I'll give you a great example. About 5 years ago, I was working for a large defense contractor, and we handled disaster recovery for several state agencies here in Texas. And the biggest of those was a $1 million a year DR contract that we administered for them. And we planned DR tests every 6 months, and each of those tests took about 2 weeks. So we were constantly planning for the next DR test. I can't imagine today, unless you had some very specialized environment like a mainframe, I can't imagine with the development in products like Cloudy and with the cloud-based storage that's available to us, that type of DR plan and DR expense, I think, is long gone. So part of the point is costs have gone way down, and because the costs have gone way down, many companies are actually putting a DR plan in place today that didn't or couldn't before due to budget constraints.
The only thing I would add on to that as well is I think that the real beauty of this is that the cost versus performance trade-off isn't as striking as it used to be, right? When your options were disk, which was very expensive, or tape, which was very slow, that balance was something you really had to think long and hard about. But now, when you have the ability to get 5 megabytes of throughput through a disk environment, which is the same cost point as cloud, you really have the option of getting both cost and performance.
Great. This is for both Earl and John. How does object storage perform regarding data ingest rates compared to other disk-based solutions? Is there a significant difference, and why?
Yeah, I'll handle that one first, and then Earl, if you want to chime in. The inherent limiting factor in any disk-based system is obviously the disk itself, and then how effectively you're able to stripe data across multiple disks. So in the Cloudian environment, that parallelism is built in. Obviously, the other vendors have done the same thing. They've worked parallelism into their environments. The beauty of Cloudian is that parallelism is something which is done at a per node level. So as you grow the environment and add more nodes, that parallelism just continues to grow in its effectiveness. That's not true in scale-up storage environments, where you're eventually going to run out of bandwidth at the storage head level, which is not so easy to scale. At that point, when you run out of bandwidth there, then you're starting off with a new environment and having to grow again. Cloudian scales very organically just by adding these bricks. So I think the way we handle the performance scaling is very different. And if you look at the cost per performance versus us versus other environments, if you think of it in terms of cost per terabyte per hour, Cloudian comes out substantially less expensive than other disk environments because of the fact that we are able to scale performance so so seamlessly.
Yeah, I agree 100% with everything John said.
Great. All right. So another question on how does the Cloudian license work with respect to backup software? Do I need another license for the backup software? If yes, talk a little bit more about the compatible backup software. You mentioned some before.
Yeah, this is part of what's really exciting about object storage right now in this realm is the S3 interface is now so widely deployed across different backup software packages, and I think it's either a built-in feature or low-cost addition in all of them. I don't see any of them charging exorbitant rates for doing this because they look at it as a way of backing up to the cloud. And we just happen to use that same interface for backing up on-prem, so it's integrated. From our standpoint, our software is we either sell software-defined storage where you can get software and run it on your own servers and storage, or we can sell it as an appliance. There again, you've got two very cost-effective ways of going about this, and both of them are industry-standard hardware. So whether you're talking about our software, or you're talking about the software you need from the backup vendor side, it's very cost-effective on both fronts.
Okay, great. Another one is, I read in a recent press article about Cloudian durability at scale. What do you mean by durability at scale? How does a Cloudian solution ensure that my data is always on and highly available?
So the Cloudian availability is another element that's built into the environment because object storage uses multiple data protection schemes. You can use erasure coding, which is a way of striping data across multiple disks, or you can use replication. So erasure coding you can think of as being like RAID. RAID is a way of striping data across disks, except the RAID group is fixed. So you have a group of 5 drives or 7 drives or whatever that's a fixed group, and data is striped across them. In erasure coding, you're striping data across drives, but those drives can exist anywhere in the environment. They can be on different nodes even. And that provides a very high degree of flexibility, again, in how you're scaling performance, because now you can move data across multiple nodes to optimize throughput. We also enable replication, and this is something that's configurable at the granular level, so you can have a particular folder that is replicated while another folder is simply protected by erasure coding. And what that does is lets you protect data in the way that's appropriate for that particular data type. For example, you can take a Cloudian cluster and spread it across multiple locations. You could have 6 nodes sitting at a location in San Mateo, where we are, and another 6 nodes sitting at a location in Reno, Nevada, which is outside of the earthquake zone, for example. And you can replicate data across those 2 sets of nodes built in, right? So the data replication happens as part of your configuration settings. It's not an extra feature. It's not a extra thing you have to manage. It's just you're saying this particular folder, which has this particular data, is going to be replicated because I want to make sure it's in 2 locations. You can take another folder, another set of data, and say, this folder I'm going to protect with erasure coding, and it's okay if it only lives at one site because it's less critical information. So that granularity means you can now manage different data in different ways and optimize your cost and availability to suit. That's something that's unique to the object storage environment.
Okay, great. Another question is, how does backup software know how to send parallel uploads to all the Cloudian nodes as they scale?
So this is something that's managed actually at the API level. So the API, S3 API, is going to break up buckets, break up objects, or excuse me, it's going to break up streams into objects. So we determine object sizes, which are going to be, as large or small as you like. They can be set at a maximum size, and those objects are going to move in over to different nodes depending on where they actually got stored. The objects act like individual files, but the beauty of it is that they are not. They can be chunks of files, and that's usually what they are. So in a large file environment where you're trying to break it up and create parallelism, break it up into smaller objects that are then going to go out into the cluster environment, and because they are being striped, they will by definition end up on different nodes in the environment. So it's actually something that it occurs at the S3 level because of the multi-part upload functionality, and something that occurs at the cluster by virtue of how they get striped across all the devices. So there's a level of parallelism that just occurs architecturally.
Great. Well, that's the time that we have for today. I apologize if we aren't able to get to your questions, but we will make sure to follow up with you after the webinar to ensure your question is answered. If you have any other questions that you haven't entered in here, please feel free to reach out to Claudian at info@claudian.com or check out our website, www.claudian.com. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you.